Hey, we done told you viewer discretion's advised, like, every frickin' almost episode. You gotta be careful with that, man. We can't just be dropping F-bombs and you got the kids. The kids right there, man. I'm trying to help these kids. I ain't trying to do them wrong. Come on, what the fuck's wrong with you? Viewer discretion. It's advised. That's final. This episode of Hi and Hello is brought to you in part by voting. If you did or you didn't, guess we'll see what happens. Hey guys, keep it in mind, we got stickers, we got business cards, and we also got magnets now. So if you got a business or you think your boss would be cool with it, hit us up. Let us know. We'll drop some cards by you, and we'll also give you a shout out on the show. Other than that, man, we just hit 15,000 people, views, engagements, all that good stuff. Thank you, Facebook Insight. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing, guys. That means whether you like it or not, you're out there listening, you're out there retaining, and hopefully you're out there being a little bit better than you were yesterday. Because goddammit, we need people like that right now. Without any further ado, let's get into this week's episode. New episode of Hi and Hello starts now. Dig it. Hey everybody, we are gonna go live with it. First time trying the new mic as well. Alright, so hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Hi and Hello. Tyler as always, you hear it in the intro. Hey, so today's guest I'm very excited to have. I've known this gentleman for 5-6 years roughly.
Something like that.
Met in Chicago, but neither from Chicago. You guys have heard my backstory, we'll get a little bit of his. Everyone has the smartest person they know in their life, okay? I will not say that he will consider himself the smartest person I've ever met, but this man that we're about to listen to and dive deep into with has always had not only the right thing to say, but something to say. And that's not a compliment, it's not me trying to slap the guy.
That's accurate.
It's just accurate.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
And
for better or for worse, something to say.
With no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dylan. Dylan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey everybody.
So let's dive into it. Where are you from, man?
I'm from everywhere, but I tell people I'm from Minnesota. I am. Let's see. My parents broke up when I was young, and my mom was the person I grew up with, and she moved around a lot. So, and she wasn't like military or anything like that. We just were poor, and like, my mom worked in the service industry. So essentially, like, we would chase from town to town where money was good. You know, if a town is going through bad economic times, the people who work for tips usually feel it the worst. So like, I don't know. It seemed like we were always trying to, chase the sun, kind of. But because of that, I lived in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Alabama, Wyoming.
What age did you make your first major move?
Probably before I could remember. When I was like 1, my dad moved my mom and I out to Wyoming, which is where my sister was born, when I was like 2.
Which one were you the most upset with? That you're like, I don't want to leave here, but we have to go.
I don't know.
That you can recall.
It's one of those things where I think there was a house that we lived in Wisconsin. We used to live in Wausau, which is sort of like, it's within the like top 5 most populous cities in Wisconsin, but I wouldn't really consider it like a place like a notable place to go. It's just sort of like one of the bigger cities in the state. But we lived in this one house that had this gigantic TV just like in one of the bedrooms. Because apparently somebody who had lived there before had brought it in. And this was like a 90s big TV, like
the big box TVs.
Yeah. So, like the frame of the TV itself was like twice the size I was, but the actual screen was like, normal big screen size TV. Oh, my phone's...
It is totally fine.
Sorry. I hope you guys like Gundam, because I do.
Because he does. I remember those big box TVs, man. I thought that was the coolest fucking thing. Well, and that's... Go to, like, family events and shit, but that's just it. Once it's in a room, like, I remember watching, like, 6 of my cousins try to move a TV from the upstairs down into the basement, because they had a new basement room, you know what I'm saying? Kids with the basement rooms threw the coolest parties, I'm just gonna say it. Because their parents were cool enough to give them a whole fucking floor.
Well, and also you're under the soundproof part of the house essentially, so people care a lot less about what you do because it doesn't just ring out through the whole building.
Basements, though, good lord, this pod brought to you in part by basements. Now, fuck whatever I say at the beginning, man, because now it's about basements. But all right, so you had this giant ass TV that had to be the coolest thing. How old do you think you were when that was?
I was like 9, and when we moved into the place, they were showing it to. Well, it was before we had moved in, but it was when they were showing it to us, and my mom was trying to figure out if we were going to live there. And I walked into the room and I saw this TV, and I was just like, does that come with the house? And they were like, yeah, we can't move it out. Like, it just stays there. Nobody can figure out how to get it to work. They're like, it sits there, but you can't get a picture with it. Like, nobody can get it to play from a VCR or anything. And I was like, we should live here, and I want this room. And it was a big room. Like that building that we lived in was I guess townhouse would have been the most accurate way to describe it. It made sense based on sort of how Chicago is laid out. If you lived in Chicago, you recognize a building where each floor is a different unit. But in Wisconsin, that wasn't as common. There were still buildings like that, but it wasn't always the thing.
We left the most important part, man. You can't leave us on a cliffhanger there. What the fuck? Did you get the TV up and running?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was the thing. So I was like, I want this room, and my mom was like, yeah, no, this is a nice place. My sister picked one of the other rooms. It had this big sunroom in the back. It was a nice place, all things considered. And it was in a place where we lived within walking distance of this place that made really good ice cream cones and sundaes and stuff. So that was probably the place that I have the best memories for, if only because we only lived there for about a year, and in that year, within the first week, I got the TV working. Yeah. Because I've just always had a way with electronics. I am a firm believer that trickle-down economics basically means if you know how to fix things, you can take rich people's stuff and make it work for you. So you can't take it directly from them, but take their broken shit, because that's basically how I get by. It's rich people are like, oh, this really expensive thing stopped working and I don't know what to do with it, and I'm like, I can fix that. And they're like, oh, I already bought a replacement, so you can just have it.
Since we didn't know each other growing up, we met later on in life. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when I meet people like that, and if someone came up to me like, hey, tell me as much as you can think of this person, for example. It's like, okay. I sometimes fuck around with the in-between, and I'm just like, how can I describe a childhood of a person without knowing, being there in the classroom with them? And if I had one for you, it would be and don't take this the wrong way, it would be you remember in Phantom Menace how fucking baby Anakin was working on pods and shit? Yeah. You would have been just the cooler kid in his class. Yeah, I know. In my eyes, just because you can tinker and fuck around with shit and every time I watch Rick and Morty, for example, and he's like, here, you want something to make? There you go. You happy? I just think that. I wonder if that was Dylan as a kid. He's just I have this little wrench set in my pocket kind of thing, and I can fix it.
See, what's funny to me is that I have that reputation with a lot of people because I have sort of a knack with electronics, and that's how I would describe it. Is that I have a knack with them that sort of extends beyond what I actually know about them, because I can get things to work and I don't know why.
Right.
And that's more important to focus on because that's largely what enables me to do things like that. I try to learn how stuff works so that I can fix it if it breaks. But the truth is that I don't know how to use a soldering iron. I couldn't rewire something to save my life. I did wiring for a semester in 7th grade, and I don't remember any of it. So I couldn't take something that has broken electronics and fix it. But I am really good at recognizing when something doesn't need to be soldered. If you can fix something without having to do what you imagined, the Rick part of taking it apart and fixing it, but it really just needs oh, this part is bad, and if you switch it out, the whole thing will work again. I'm really good at that. So I can basically assess whether or not I can fix something pretty quickly. But I usually just take something and look at it and be like,
So you can build a computer, but you can't build a motherboard.
Yeah. Yeah, if you gave me all the parts, absolutely. Yeah. I know how things should work and how they interact together, but I can't take things that don't work and be like, cool, well, this wire is disconnected. I mean, I suppose if it was only one wire and it was obvious that was the one, and I could see the points where it had been soldered, I could probably look up how to use a soldering iron on the internet and connect that one wire. But
Exactly.
like, I'm not at
YouTube
home.
University, like,
Yeah, I'm not those guys on YouTube who are like, this is how you take apart your iPhone to fix it. Like, I can take apart your iPhone if I think that there's a loose part in it. But I can't take apart your iPhone and put a new screen in it.
Exactly. I can. That's kind of cool. I can put a screen on it.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Like, I can do that shit at Radio Shack.
Exactly, no, and that's what I mean. Like, I possess a small amount of that, but mostly what I know is, like, how to figure out, like, can I use this or not? And,
Right.
like, what is not really broken, essentially. Like, that's what I'm good at recognizing, is what isn't actually broken and what only needs to be, like, minorly adjusted to actually work again.
So
Because...
was it something dumb, like was like a cord not making a connection or some shit?
Yeah, it
something
was-
looked blackout fried or something.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, look at that.
It was essentially like the wire had to be set a very specific way. Like the jack was all messed up. And what's more is that whoever had it lost the remote.
Okay.
And they didn't know how to make the TV use the menu without it. So like they couldn't get to like the right channels for things. And so like by the time we had left, I had hooked my PlayStation up to it and I lived there. I lived with my PlayStation and that TV, and nothing could bother me.
Very Courage the Cowardly Dog, like him up in the attic or
Oh,
something
yes.
with his computer.
Oh god, when I got a computer, it was worse.
Was it?
But like, I had managed to get my VCR working with it for the most part. So like, I couldn't watch. Well, for a while I was able to get PBS. So I would occasionally watch like daytime TV on PBS if it was something interesting. But like mostly I would just like hook my VCR up to it and I could like finagle the wires to work and I was like, cool, well, big ass TV. And when we left that place, that sucked. And it was largely because of that, you know, because I was like 9 and I had this thing that I was pretty certain I would never be able to have again. You know, like I didn't know we were poor in the full sense. But I understood that there were like very distinct limitations on the things we could acquire because my TV was like some 40-inch, you know, monster that weighed like 300 pounds that only existed because it came with the house. The TV that we watched like regular TV on in our living room was like a 20-inch monitor.
No shit.
Yeah, it was like a little bitty thing, you know, and like that's what we had for like 5 years.
Isn't it interesting to like look back? Like, I wonder what we're gonna be saying. Excuse me. I wonder what we're gonna be saying when we're like 50. You know what I'm saying? Like, you remember when we used to have that 50-inch fucking TV? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kids would be fucking. You're lucky we don't give you a 50-inch. Like, that's crazy. Not to say kids are involved, but fucking still, like, that's.
I mean, it's one
progression of televisions and bullshit.
Yeah, well, I mean, like it basically like. In the future, I mean, realistically, like miniaturization is what we're seeing. So, like, yeah, screens theoretically get bigger, but they also get smaller when they get bigger. Like, you know, you can make a screen that's 50 inches wide now, but like is only an inch thick, and plays sound and has a computer inside of it and like all this other shit.
Right.
So, like, while realistically, like, TVs can't really get too much thinner. I mean, you can get to the point where, like, you're essentially just, like, having a screen project an image that somehow maybe magically is a computer and makes sound, too, but, like, they're already pretty thin. Realistically, what I think you'll see is more, like, personal peripherals for stuff. So, again, just continuing with, like, miniaturization. Like, we've seen it with Google Glass. Like,
do you think that has potential and it's coming faster than we think? Because we saw some people get to try it out, and a lot of people are like, well, it's cool for a minute, but like it has its effect and it kind of wears off because there's still glitching and this and that.
I mean, that was the point of that, was to get all of that feedback so they could fine tune it. I mean, realistically, like when we've seen like the second and third betas for Glass is when we'll start seeing interesting things. Because the first one was just like, wow, this is cool. It's augmented reality. I have a computer screen over my face. But like, the next version of that is going to be smaller. And it's going to be more reactive. And we're not going to see it until they're ready to do another beta. And then they're going to have a bunch of people around again. And they're going to be like, I did the last one and I did this one and it was so much better. And that's just going to continue. It's like when we did smartphones. I mean, like, the first people to have them, you were like, well, I'm never going to have that. Like, that's so far away and I can't, like, look at how small their phone is. And you're like, well, my phone's small, but not in the same way, you know, because you had like a little chunky Nokia phone. So it was like physically small, but it was still like a brick.
What was your favorite cell phone design you've had so far, or is it what you currently have?
Well, that's I consider my phones to exist in two different classes, I guess. Like, I don't consider smartphones to be regular cell phones. I don't think they should count in that. like comparison, because what you have in your pocket now is a computer, and what you had in your pocket in the early 2000s was a phone. That's all it did. It was a phone that could like send text messages and like you could play Snake on, but it was mostly just a phone.
Motorola or something.
What you have now is a computer that can make phone calls.
Whatever happened to the term Palm Pilot, man?
Well,
when I was a kid and I saw like businessmen with their Palm Pilot and their little styles, I was like, man, that's dope as fuck.
Well, Palm Pilot is copyrighted.
Is it really?
Yeah, no, it's
BlackBerry?
Yeah, well, I think it's owned by BlackBerry now.
Oh shit.
But like, yeah, Palm Pilot.
I guess I never paid attention.
Yeah, Palm Pilot was a brand, like a copyrighted brand. So like, it went wherever that company went, which is probably getting owned by somebody else. And then like, you know, like you couldn't, like what we have now is essentially in a lot of ways the like successor to Palm Pilots, and that makes sense. But like, I don't think you could market a Palm Pilot now, because it would just give you this impression of some archaic grandpa machine that, you know, like,
right,
stylus required. You know?
But at the same time, though, like, our generation is so fucking nostalgic, like, about everything dumb. I wonder if they're gonna get sick of these magic glass screens and shit, and one day those styles of phones are gonna pop back up.
No.
You don't think so?
Well, okay, so there are exceptions to that, but for the most part, I don't think so. And the exceptions are all very niche case, like old people. Have you ever heard of the jitterbug?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like, a jitterbug is a great example of, like, old-style cell phones making a comeback, but it's not because people are into old-style cell phones. It's because bigger buttons and easier-to-read screens are necessary for people who have poor eyesight. That's just making phones more accessible.
Man, I'm saying, though, the slide-out keyboard was huge. Like, those, you remember that?
Yeah, no,
slide-out keyboard happened?
Well, and the thing of it is that, like, we're past the point of caring about physical keyboards. Like, if there was ever a chance for that to happen, it would have happened by now. But we're so, like, used to touch keyboards. I mean, like, at this point, what's it? Jack's got the new Galaxy, the S9.
Yeah.
And I have the S8.
Okay.
And the big difference between them, besides, like, the fact that the screen takes up more of her, like, the front of her phone, is that in that, it removes the physical home button. Like, that button in the center you press that, like,
right.
Fucking, her phone doesn't have that. It's, like... It's part of the like screen sensor function. Like it's just the part where the home button is always on for the screen, so you can just tap it and it will bring it up. But like there's no physical button anymore. And like she's never complained about it once, because well, to be fair, she never had a phone before that. Like she had one phone before that was a smartphone that had a button like that, but like that phone sucked. Like it sucked. It was a Galaxy Prime.
Yeah,
you know, it was a garbage phone. It was so like.
It's like third-party provider kind of phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, such a drastic step up in quality of phone, she didn't even, like, notice that there was no center home thing. Like, she might have when it first happened, but she never brought it up. She was never like, oh, I wish I had that button like you have. Like,
yeah.
So, in general, like, most people, as long as the functionality gets, like, done, they don't care. You know, you can take away physical... And that's the other thing. Like, peripherals are just more shit to go through. Like... Sure, it's nice to be more certain of what you're typing because you can physically feel a button when you're using that little slide-out keyboard. But that makes your phone bigger and heavier. And surprisingly enough, people do actually care a lot about that. It seems like a dumb thing, but like that's like in tons of reviews I see, shape, contour, and weight of a phone get brought up constantly.
How easy do you think it would be for some super organization just to at one click wipe the phones, or just fucking hack them and just black it out the screen? Like, nothing will be responsive. It's just a fucking brick now. Right. So cyber terrorism, if you will.
So there are theoretically a couple of ways that could happen, and they're all pretty unlikely. For a couple of different reasons. The most obvious way that you could do something like that is to not directly target phones, but just to literally try to defry all electronic devices, period. Any sort of like strong electromagnetic pulse will fry unshielded electronics, which most electronics are in this day and age. A good deal of them are shielded too, so it's not like everything goes out, but like most consumer electronics aren't hardened against EMPs because like it's technically a form of like radiation, and so are radio waves. So like if you make a phone unable to like pick up radiation, it makes a shitty receiver. So like there are things that are specially built for that can do both, like be hardened against radiation and still have good reception. But like it would make your phone heavier and more expensive. So we don't do that for consumer tech. So like big electromagnetic pulse, that could destroy all stuff, and that's pretty feasible. I mean, it's not easy because generating that type of pulse requires like a nuclear blast or a power plant, or it requires a lot of energy, like more than you can get easily, like more than the average person could get without drawing attention to themselves. So that's pretty unlikely to happen because the power needed to do something like that, like the sheer like raw energy needed, is too hard to attain without drawing attention. As far as like hacking stuff goes, okay.
You guys should have seen him. You guys, oh man, I got to start recording people's reactions. That was a beautiful, like, oh, here we go.
All right, so like computers are just really difficult to explain, like what they can and can't do, because it's like medicine. Like if you're a doctor and you're like, this person is not going to make it, they've got 2 months to live, and then 6 months later they're still alive and they're better, and people are like, you're an idiot, and you're like, no, I'm not an idiot. That's just what conventional knowledge about medicine says about that guy. I'm glad he's alive, but like based on all the evidence we had, it looked like he wasn't going to live. So that, and that's sort of how computers are, where it's like, I could tell you that computers aren't magic and they can't do all these things, but that's really only until someone figures out how to do that and proves me wrong, then makes me look like an idiot. And like, I would argue that it's probably pretty impossible for one individual group to gain control of all electronics or all phones or, all networked devices. Which would be in like a contained area. In an area? Like
oh yeah, 6 or 7 city blocks.
Oh dude, are you kidding me? The police can do that to you now. I mean, they can't wipe your shit. Well, they probably could, but like, maybe. But like the police can basically like intercept and deny all communications within a couple of blocks of like a specific vehicle. Like they have there are like these trucks that they have that just fucking grab signals and like prevent outgoing traffic and incoming traffic. So like if you've ever seen like reports of people at like emergencies, and I mean, and there is a legitimate reason for it to have this. Like I know it sounds super dystopian to be like, oh, they have this thing that can prevent you from making phone calls, and it, in the wrong use, it can be terrifying because you'll hear about it during emergencies, and that emergency can be a flood or that emergency can be a protest. And so like you'll hear stories about people who are at protests who are like, yeah, no, I couldn't get cell phone calls out, and like you find out later on that the police had like one of these vehicles nearby, and they do that to disrupt people trying to organize like violent events, because the idea is that like short range communication is largely what they need to be able to organize because it's so loud. So if you prevent that, then like they can't organize within a group and they just sort of fizzle out, and that prevents larger conflicts. But they also do it during emergencies so that they can communicate. Because like if a building's on fire and everyone inside of it is calling 911 and everyone around is calling 911, then they can't talk across the lines. So like that's a really small example, be it like a single fire, but like if like 9/11, some gigantic event like an earthquake or something where there's literally like thousands of people throwing in interference into the lines,
flooding the lines,
then you roll this truck out and you can communicate in this area because now you control all communications within 3 blocks. And that lets you operate so that you can actually save people's lives because they're not clogging up your ability to organize. So it's technology. Technology is never inherently good or bad. It is entirely about whose hands it's in.
What do you love about technology? Like what's something you genuinely love about technology, and without technology you would miss, obviously?
Oh well, I mean, like everything, dude. Modern life is completely like
it's based on technology at this point.
Well, I mean, like it's always been based on technology. I mean,
true.
Well, no, because like technology, like okay, so. When you say technology, you mean like this microphone, power. Yeah. But like technology is a really broad term, and there's a good reason for that, and that's really how I like fit that idea that like no technology is inherently good or evil, is because technology extends beyond electronics and machines. It also extends to things like government. All forms of government are a type of technology, because like you grow it and you test it and you develop it, and it's like anything else. Like it was developed by people over time off a refinement of ideas, and it's a functioning machine, more or less, that makes other things happen. So, and without government, you don't have like larger amounts of trade, you don't have defenses. Like all of these things are based on the idea of a technology. Language is a technology. The fact that we can speak to each other is something that someone came up and tooled around with. Like hundreds of people across time have like monkeyed with your language a little bit to make it evolve. You're speaking English 345.0165. Like you're speaking some later version of English, but it's a technology. It's been readapted and re-released over and over and over again. And it facilitates communications. That's why it exists. It's a technology we developed so that I could convey ideas to you and back and forth. So for me, I think, like that's really what I appreciate about technology, is that like it enables everything. But like it enables everything, good and bad. So, technology could theoretically eradicate a disease like we did with polio. But like technology can also be used to convince people that they should stop taking vaccines because you have a platform that didn't exist 50 years ago when they were eradicating polio to give your crazy ideas out to the world. In fact, polio can make a comeback. Things like that are, the dual-edged nature of technology. Like, all things are inherently neutral. We decide whether or not something is good or bad. Government can be good or bad. Facebook can be good or bad. It's just, we don't really have very good rules for I don't even know if it should be rules. Like, we just don't have very good, guidelines for how to use any of our technology. It's one of those things where, you see those memes a lot of the time about, how you're 25 and you're in a store and some kid's I need a grown-up, and you look around and you're like, where are the grown-ups? And you realize you're the grown-up. That's kind of how everything is. It's not just paying my taxes and doing my dishes. It's also when you drive a car. How do you decide what sort of mentality you're going to take when you get inside your armored vehicle and travel 60 miles an hour in this giant metal machine that could smash anything? Who taught you that? Some person did, but that's it. Is you get these weird sort of partial guidelines because nobody sits and is this is everything you need to know. And even when they tell you that, they can't actually tell you everything you need to know. They can try, but they just can't. So everybody is sort of just I've got all this stuff that was invented by people who are way smarter than me, and I don't really know what it's for. I just use it to do this part of my life, to make my life easier. And I wouldn't say that's incorrect. I think if you find any use if you can find a way to use some piece of technology to make your life easier, happier, more productive, whatever you want out of it, then you've used the technology correctly. There are people who are oh, I can't stand bad grammar, or people who use slang, and I'm if they said a sentence to you and you understood what they meant by it, they used the language correctly.
Right.
And even if you specifically didn't understand it, if most of the people they know would have understood it, then they are using it correctly, because the whole point of the language is to facilitate communication. So if they can communicate with everyone in their life that matters, the way they talk, it doesn't matter if it seems proper to you. It's still proper use of technology. So it's just I don't know, the thing that I love most about technology is also what frustrates me most about it, which is just it can be anything in anyone's hands, and most people don't know what to do with it. I don't know what to do with it half the time. That's why I spend all my time studying. It's like that thing, it's I don't is it Confucius who's the only thing I know is that I know nothing?
Yes.
Yeah. That hit me a long time ago, and that's why I spend all my time reading and looking shit up. It's not because I don't even think half this shit's gonna matter, but I don't want to be caught off guard.
At what age did that hit you? At a very early age, or was that something maybe that you picked up once you were on your own 2 feet?
Oh no, that happened to me when I was that probably happened to me when I lost my faith.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was 12 or 13, and my personal life, my home life, was just a disaster. My parents never got along, and their relationship could be described as violent. My dad went to prison for assaulting my mom, so there's that was just messed up all the time. And at that particular time, there was a lot between them that was messed up. There was a lot between the person she was seeing at the time that was messed up. we were also moving, and like, I just sort of remember thinking to myself, like, I went to Catholic school up until that point, so I was like, super religious.
Really?
Well, yeah, because my life sucked. I was the perfect candidate for religion. You have a shitty life that literally nothing but like an otherworldly power can seem to fix. Well, then come talk to us about our otherworldly power.
Yeah, very true.
You know, and I was there all the time. Like, I was there 5 days a week. You know, I mean, we didn't go to church every day, but we were in Catholic school learning about Jesus 5 days a week. And, like, by that point, I just, like, looked around and thought to myself, I've been praying my whole life. And nothing has ever gotten better because of it. I don't really know now if that's, like, good evidence to make that decision, but at the time, that was evidence enough.
I kind of started to step away from religion after I found out there was more than one religion.
I went through that too.
Yeah, where we were driving around and I remember they were building a new church and it was like a Methodist church, right? And I was talking to my dad or my aunt or someone and I was like, hey, what's up? What are they building? And like, it's a church. And I was like, we have a church. Like, why don't they just come to our church? Like, that's what we do, right? And then slowly more churches started to pop up in this little town of like 17,000 at most. And I started to realize, like, holy shit. So you're telling me we have these 6 different buildings in a 20-block radius, and each one has their own interpretation on a story, but this one's to a totally different person. This one's to somebody who this person hates. Like, there's, like, different factions, and at the time I was young enough to be watching, like, wrestling with my cousins all the time and shit like that. And so I just started to, like, kind of associate it with just, like, a weird... Like sports, basically, to where I was just like, there's people who root for Jesus and there's people who root for Buddha, and like, and it just it really took any honesty out of it, because like if everyone thinks they know the answer to like this big divine fable over what thousands of years and shit like that, depending on which one you follow, longer than others, to like the creation of religion in the first place. Fuck, man, there's a lot of time in between. And then my mind just started to just pull apart on it, and other shit seemed more important to focus on.
I think sports is a very apt metaphor, largely because of the similarities that you see between people's identities as sports fans and their identities as religious followers. And also because, like, statistically in this country, those are 2 of the biggest identifiers for people outside of race and gender, is what religion do you follow, if any, and what sports teams do you care about. And that's one of my favorite things about reading history is, like, people are always saying stuff like, it's worse now than it's ever been, or we've never seen anything like this, and like, there is a vanity in that makes me smile, if only because, like, there is nothing unique about anything that has ever happened to us. Like, the only unique things we have are stuff that we can point to, like, you know, computers. There's been no point in history before where we've ever had computers like this, because they're being developed as we speak. But, like, as far as things that have, like, happened in the past, or the way people act hasn't changed ever. Because humans haven't really changed ever. I mean, like, just like biologically, like, you are the same monkey that climbed down from trees and fucking, like, mated with Neanderthals and fucking, like, Australopithecus and shit. Like, you're the same.
I love Australopithecus.
You're the same monkey. Like, that existed. It's the whole idea behind paleo, is that, like, literally, like, you're the same monkey biologically, so you should eat what that monkey ate, because all the other food wasn't designed for you. You evolved to do this. And, like, humans stopped evolving a long time ago, and there's nothing... Well, I wouldn't say we stopped, but, like, evolution takes so long that, like, the time between when we last had, like, a major evolution and where we are now is like a blink of an eye. So it's not that we stopped, it's just, like, we're not going to be able to notice it for another couple million years because of the scale. But, like, people have been the same, and they've always been doing weird shit, like identifying with their religions and their sports teams. In ancient, I want to say, Rome? You're familiar with, like, the chariot races and stuff in Rome?
Absolutely.
So chariot racing teams were essentially how the people of Rome identified beyond their religion. Like, they were color-coded. Like, they had names, but it was like the red and the blue team and, like, the green team.
Right.
And you defined yourself very heavily by if you were a red team fan. And I mean, like, you know, we look at stuff where it's like, oh, you know, these people won a sports game and then they trashed their city. Why would you do something like that?
Did you see when Philadelphia destroyed itself,
yeah,
dude? They were on top of, like, the Hilton's little roof thing, fucking caved it in.
And that is nothing new for humanity. because
cars and shit.
Because, like, that's how the Romans used to celebrate. They would just trash entire neighborhoods. They would also, like, trash their, like, city fighting with each other. Like, full-scale city riots over...
Well, it's just like football clubs today.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like, the way we identify has not changed in thousands of years. It's exactly the same. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because I think what's important is that... And what makes religion so important is how people identify with it. I think that's why, like, we live in what seem like such extreme times. And, I mean, they are. Don't get me wrong. But, like... They are at this point because essentially, like, a whole bunch of people in this country identify with their religion. And their religion, their, like, religious identity is, like, highest priority. You know, it's like God, family, country. And you and I are in the country tier, at best. If we exist in that tier at all, we're in country, assuming that we count as Americans today.
Right.
Because lots of times we don't. And if you don't fit in that list, you don't matter. But, like, that keeping of small priorities and that very strict hierarchy very strongly defines people's identity. And so, like, when they see things seemingly becoming less Christian, they feel like their identity is being threatened, because that's, like, the highest part of their identity. You know, it's like, my God, Jesus, how I identify with those figures, the religion that I follow to worship them, is me. I am a Christian. I am whatever, you know, and, like, that's not all religious people, but, like, in this country, we have a lot of Christians that identify that way. I mean, most Muslims and Jewish people and other religions that I've met in this country are usually not that extreme. That's very few and far in between.
Right.
But, like, there, for whatever reason, the identity, that like, team nature is, I think, what drives a lot of what we see right now. Is that essentially, like, other people's teams are just getting to play on the field. And they're like, this is our field. You don't even get to play here.
Right. Oh, heavy shit on this one, man. Like, we're going deep. Fuck it, guys. What we at? We're only at fucking 36 minutes, man. We still got plenty of time. Plenty of time. Damn. So, anything in your life been going on lately, or are you just kind of kicking back for the time being?
Well, I mean, I'm on vacation this week.
Oh, beautiful.
I'm on vacation until Thursday. I go back to work. But yeah, I mean, I'm always working. I don't know how not to. Like, I'm depressed, and I'm pretty sure I have, like, ADHD or something, because, like, I can't, like, turn my brain off half the time. Like, I have to, like, do, like, counting and breathing exercises simultaneously to fall asleep. Because I just have to, like, trick my brain into, like, doing something really monotonous.
Teach me. Because I'm up till fucking 4 or 5 nights.
No, it helps. Like, it doesn't...
Crazy.
There's no guarantee, but at the very least, I do rest more. So even if I don't sleep a whole bunch, like, doing those exercises relaxes me more. So that, at the very least, I'm laying in the dark with my eyes closed, and I'm relaxed. That's not sleep, but that's better than sitting up in front of my computer staring at a screen for 3 hours.
It's like a Batman nap.
Yes. Well, and, you know, they say stuff like that is actually good for you, like, essentially like a quick nap like that, too. You know, even if you only got, like, 20 minutes, just go lay down in the dark and take some deep breaths for 20 minutes. And when that 20 minutes rolls by, you're going to be like, oh, man, I could sleep and I kind of want to. But then after you shake that off, you're going to be like, but I'm really glad I laid down.
That's how it felt when I would go do the flotation tanks.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you out there who don't know, the decompression tanks, or the sensory deprivation tanks.
Oh, man, yeah.
Decompression tanks, I'm fucking idiot. Oh,
that's what I was wondering about.
What?
When you said decompression, I was like, what, you got the bends?
Yeah, just
put him in the iron lung. So restful.
Meant to say sensory deprivation chamber. Yeah, you're just laying in, like, 6 inches of water, and then the floor underneath has 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, and your body just floats on top of it. And you can choose complete darkness if you want. If you want to go in with a light, you can. But It's interesting because those things take like 10 minutes for your body just to realize we're here. You know what I'm saying? I asked the lady when I did the first one out in Louisville, hey, what's a good amount of time to do this for? And she's like, did you drive here? And I was like, yes. And she's like, so no one's picking you up? And I was like, no. She's like, I'd say 45 minutes. And I was like, if I give you $10 more, can I do it for an hour? And she was like, yes. And I was like, cool. She's like, I know, yeah, fine, whatever. I don't know if it's against the law or something, so I didn't say which place let me do it. But yeah, I went in there and just fucking, it was definitely an experience. I kept hearing the whistle from the Andy Griffith song after like 30 minutes in. That I don't want to get pulled for.
Did you know there are several versions of that?
Is it really?
Yeah, because I've watched the Andy Griffith show like a lot, and I've seen several versions of the intro. Because they had different.
Oh, was it in each season or something?
I don't know if it was each season, but they would do a new version of it periodically. And the song changed slightly too. Because the way you were doing it is the way I remember it.
Right.
Like, that's the pitch and the tone I remember it
Oh,
as.
is there a Mandela effect about this or something?
No. It's not a Mandela effect. The way you did it is correct. But there is also more versions of that song where the pitch is slightly different. There is a version that I've heard that is separate from the one that you know. It's not somehow, actually the one the whole time. That's like, I want to say like a step higher.
No shit.
And it's like shrill. Because like the original way I remember it is like it gets up there, but it's never shrill. And like the version I heard of it starts off, and that first couple of notes are like way up there to the point where it almost sounds like a bird whistling.
Yeah, it was like a tweet.
Yeah. So like that was just weird to me. Yeah, it was just like, how many versions of this song are there? I wonder. Like,
it was just weird as fuck, man. One of the interesting things though was after you finally get out, because once you got like 5 minutes left to kind of snap back into it, and I'm not gonna lie, at like 58 roughly, I was honestly the longest I've gone awake without having a cell phone on me or in my face. So like once I heard like this rising hum starts, and they had this fucking techno light thing to where it just started to like
a sunrise, yeah,
barely sunrise up, but it would come up like green at first, and then it'd come up red, and it was introducing you to like color again, and it was just a little like goes right over your head. That was the weirdest fucking thing, dude. It was cool as shit. That
sounds pretty cool.
But
I've always wanted to do one of those.
Oh, they're great, man. There's a spot up in Evanston. It's only like $40 for your first try.
That's cool.
When you plan it out, I mean, yeah, it's $1.25 for you to just kind of lay in your bathtub, but you're not laying in your bathtub.
Oh yeah, no. That's largely why I don't do it. It's just money. Like it's just a number of like amazing things in this world that sound cool that cost more money than I can afford. Because it's like, I want to eat this month.
That's how I feel about those jetpacks you can get on the lake and just like like get the water spitting and shit.
Yeah.
Dude, there's a guy down I want to say it's at Navy Pier now. There was a guy who shows up for like a month, and he's like, it's mine, it's insured, have fun, give me $100 and I'll give you 30 minutes. And
nice.
People line up for it. And
yeah, dude.
Why not jetpack around the lake?
Well, they told us there would be jetpacks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad there aren't, but they did tell us there would be. So
have you ever seen people fucking breaking their necks on those fucking things, though?
That's exactly like I said. They told us there would be. I'm glad there's not, but they did tell us there would be jetpacks. Like, they told us there would be flying cars and jetpacks, and I'm grateful that there are neither. Hoverboards, I could stand, because those are not nearly as dangerous as jetpacks or flying cars. But that's where, like, hoverboards are, like, the most, like, anti-gravity technology I think the general public should be allowed to have. Because I've driven on the road. I know what the traffic accident statistics in this country are like. I do not trust any of you motherfuckers with a flying car or a jetpack. I live on the second floor, and I like knowing that cars will not crash into my window at any point.
Absolutely.
I do not ever want to have a time in my life where I'm like, God, I hope those fucking kids from down the street learn how to drive correctly so they don't careen into my window next week. Like, fuck that.
Oof. Dude, you just instilled a fear in me that I didn't know I needed.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Yep, I was already anti-car anti-flying car because the sound, man. It would be so fucking loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be everywhere.
They have this miniature drone sports car basically that's got, I think it's 3 propeller, and it looks like one of those 3-wheel fucking motorcycles. But it can go like It can go up, but it's not recommended to keep going up, man,
Yeah.
because you're going to get fucking tossed around by the wind. So they're like, keep it at like 50 to 60 feet off the ground. I was like, what the fuck is going on? That's like still people's houses kind of in like big cities and shit. But could you imagine the sound of like...
no.
like those propellers?
If you've never heard rotary fans that are strong enough to pick up a car with people in it, it basically sounds like a giant weed eater. It's just a constant, like, but it's gigantic, you know. It's like, it's basically like shitty jet engine, you know, like, because it's not that powerful, but it's the same, you know, it's just a lot of air turning over and being pushed by fan blades. Like, it's going to be loud. There's no, like, you can make it quieter, but that's like stealth helicopter. Is there such a thing as a stealth helicopter? Yes. Is it completely silent? Absolutely not. It's just quieter. As in, like, you can only hear it from 5 miles away instead of 20 miles away. But, like, you can still hear it. And, like, a flying car, no matter how quiet they make that fucker, is going to be louder than a normal car. Is going to be louder especially than, like, an electric car. So rather than going down in noise pollution, we'd be skyrocketing it up and, like, creating far more dangerous, like, situations where people can crash into larger parts of buildings.
Indeed. One invention I saw, like, I'm not gonna lie, I sometimes am too self-aware that I'm a slave to my technology, my phone, my tablet, my computer, shit like that, right? But one of my favorite things that I would truly miss if, like, Facebook went down, or even if they charged 50 cents, I'd probably still be like, meh, like, I don't want to do it. Like, I'll find something else that's free. I love going through those little video timeline things to where, like, you're watching one video about fucking Boston Dynamics or some shit, and then you scroll down and here's like some crazy fucking dude making a hut out of clay in his parents' backyard or something, and then you scroll down again and it's like, this is the biggest engine ever, and like you kind of fall into the rut of it, right?
You'd miss the feed. Yeah.
Oh, dude.
Of course you would.
So much fucking fun with that. But one of the things I saw on there that just blew my mind, it's in my saved videos, I'll share it on the page later. It's like this trolley bus that is the size of the street, like all the way to the sidewalk, and it's elevated up to where literally you just build the staircase basically, and it would be able to just go right over traffic.
Oh, I've seen those. Yeah, they tested those in China.
Did they?
Yeah,
Did somebody hit a leg and fucking knock the whole project to shit or something?
No, they basically just determined that, like, they're not really that helpful.
Damn.
I mean, it's basically just like, would you like a train that has all the problems of a monster truck? You know, like.
I guess, yeah.
Well, because, like,
in monster truck.
Well, and, like, in Chicago, we basically, like, you know, it was basically somebody in that area trying to combine the bus with the train. What if we had a bus that didn't stop traffic? You know, essentially, like, they more or less just, like, moved along specific lines like a railway. I mean, they weren't on a rail, but that was, like, the same sort of, like, they would follow these specific paths and stuff. And it's like, you could just build... Instead of building one shitty thing that is a combination of two things, you could just build two things correctly.
They had another version of it throughout the video, though, that I thought was pretty sweet, because it was like a fire truck, basically, to where, though it had that height, that was because it had so many jacks on it, to where it could easily go up like 70 floors or something to put out a fire and shit. So, it was interesting.
So the reason that fire trucks are built the way they are is actually because, again, like, giant... So... Like, the main problem with that bus thing was that the center of gravity for that motherfucker sat up, like, 10 feet in the air. True. Which is terrible vehicle design. And that's why fire trucks are, like, built like a tank. I mean, they're also built that way because they have all the stuff to, like, you know, work, like, to, you know...
Handle the shit.
They handle all of that water pressure.
Fire.
Yeah, the water pressure that comes out of a hydrant is, like, super intense, and, like, the trucks are set up to, like, regulate, and they
sustain the pressure.
Yeah, they've got tools inside the truck, so it's not just that it's big to be heavy. Like, there's machinery in there that has a very specific purpose for helping with firefighting, and it also, you know, it's got to carry
ladder.
Well, and it's got to carry, you know, like, a bunch of dudes, and it's got to carry all of their equipment. But, like, the reason that they do that ladder on top instead of just building a thing is because, like, you don't want to put, like, all of your weight up high on, like, axle points.
Right.
That's bad. That's all of the wrong things for designing a vehicle. That's just something that's going to tip over. And, like, it would be a million times worse if a truck were up on stilts and then fell over than if a ladder on top of a truck and that truck fell over and only the ladder fell.
True.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, I see what you're trying to do there, but you're really just creating more danger.
Speaking of creating more danger, what do you think about Elon Musk's idea to do the underground tunnels and the hyperrails and all that?
I think that anything that Elon Musk says should be taken with several grains of salt, because money makes you insane. And tech bros, more than anything, think that they have the solution to all of the world's problems if only they would listen to tech bros. But, like, that dude has all that money, and he hasn't really solved the world's problems. He's made some cool cars, and I think they're a good step forward. And I like it's really their batteries that are, like, the big deal, is their battery tech. And it's impressive, hands down. Like, they deserve all the credit they get for the batteries that they make. But Elon Musk is not tech Jesus. And most of what he says is essentially like, I read this sci-fi novel, and they do some really wild stuff in there, and we could do something like that. And
which novel?
It doesn't matter. I'm just saying, like,
right.
The stuff he says, like, he had that idea about, like, he had that idea about, like, colonizing Mars by, like, detonating nukes over it to bring the temperature up. And it was like, okay, so we're just going to bring nukes to another country? There's so many problems. Well, how are a civilian space program is just going to get nuclear weapons? That's not scary at all. You know, like, basically it was like some rich dude being like, you should give me nukes, bro. I could colonize Mars. And it's like, you just have a lot of money.
Yeah, but at the same
you don't
time,
deserve.
The man in charge of our planet, or not our planet, but our country right now, is that dumb billionaire who's listening to the smart billionaire.
Giving
like,
all of the power from one idiot billionaire to one slightly less insane billionaire is not a solution.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I'm just saying, in today's political climate, like, that could be probably done. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that were like, that'll never happen. That could fucking happen. I never thought of that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do think rail systems in general are better. My big concern with, like, mega rail systems is the same as with most other large underground projects, which is, maybe, assuming we do a whole lot more research about what the fuck drilling that far into the ground and excavating that much of the ground will do to the earth. Because fracking does some really interesting things to the earth, and that's just, like, drilling at a specific point. That's not drilling, like, across the country. Like, if you built a railway line from, like, New York to LA that was underground, that'd be a big-ass tunnel. There'd be a lot of excavation. There's no telling what that could do across that length to the ground. So, like, I'm not saying we shouldn't because something bad will happen. I'm saying we should study the effects of drilling on the Earth more before we decide to drill a giant-ass tunnel through the center of it.
It's not only that, man. It's not only just a tunnel. He's talking about, like, with his LA project or whatever, it's like 50. He's like, you can do as many tunnels as you want. You can do 100 tunnels across, and then do 100 tunnels under that, then 100 tunnels under that. And I'm like, dude, you can't just, you can't, because eventually, like, you're out of mantle. Or not, you're not, what's it, mantle, right?
The
right
mantle's,
the crust?
the mantle's right beneath the crust.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, man.
Well, and it's also one of those things where
Actually, real quick, who scares you more? Elon Musk, if you will, being seen as the tech Jesus, if as you said, for example, or Jeff
Bezos? My sugar daddy, Jeff Bezos. I work for Whole Foods. I love Amazon. I love Jeff Bezos, for the record. Of course. My raise just kicked in. I got that Amazon raise.
Amazon raise, man.
Yeah, I went from like 13 something to like $15 on the November 1st. So like that was also the first day my vacation started, and when I started filing my PTO, so I got like vacation pay at an increased rate because of that. So thanks, Jeff. What scares me more is not any individual rich tech bro. It is our exaltation of them, period. Because Jeff Bezos is another tech bro. He's not any different than Elon Musk. He made his money off of Amazon. It was just a technology. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with how either of them made their money. And they both did respectable like things to like make stores and do shit like that. But like, it's the now. And like, what's happening now is that we're basically looking to them to save us. Jeff Bezos, you control the money to all of these people. So please give us more money because we're starving. That's what scares me. Elon Musk, we are literally polluting the earth to death. Please build batteries for electric cars so that we don't pollute everything to death. Like, that's what scares me, is that, like, there's this idea that, like, the billionaires will save us. No, they won't. The billionaires put you here. Elon Musk can save you from emissions, and that's great. But men just like him developed every piece of machinery and own every company that caused this catastrophe in the first place. You don't thank someone for saving you from a dangerous situation they put you in. And what scares me is that that's exactly what we're doing right now. We are begging the rich to save us from their exploitation, that, like, the side effects of it. We're not even asking them to stop exploiting us. We're just asking them to, like, clean up their mess. Like, hey, could you stop throwing oil in the ocean? I mean, I guess if I have to, because I don't want bad publicity, but I'm only going to spend so much money on it because you'll forget about it in like 6 months. So we just constantly spend our time because they have money, and like, money is power. So essentially, like, we just beg these people to be like, will you stop? And occasionally they're like, yeah, sure, buddy, I'll stop for you. And we're like, these guys are the best. They give me money, they give me security, and it's like, they are basically your feudal lords. They hold you, like, they hold their life in your hands.
Well, we can all agree that these giant corporate owners and CEOs and shit are basically the new royalty.
Oh, I mean, America's, yeah. I mean, like, the Trumps are definitely American royalty. That much it was obvious from watching the election. I mean, America's had royalty since its beginning. We've like
no, I'm not even talking, like, when I say corporations, I mean like Amazon, Google, like the big players now.
And what I am saying is they're just the inheritors of a royal line that has existed since this country was founded.
Right.
The founding fathers may not have thought of themselves as nobles, but they essentially created a society where the wealthy still controlled everything. So there may be no people who are born of noble bloodlines, but the functionality of nobles is basically just swapped over to people who have lots of money, which is more or less the root of nobility. How do you become a noble? How did you become royalty in the first place? The answer is you had a shit ton of loot. And you convinced people using that loot to follow you. And then you eventually decided, you know why you follow me? It's not because of my treasure. It's because I'm better than you. And the people who you were paying went, yeah, sure, bro. Just keep the money coming.
Right.
You're royalty. That's how royalty begins. That's what royalty is. It's just being rich and getting people to acknowledge that your richness somehow makes you better than them. And that's what we have in this country. We literally have people being like, that guy is better than you. He knows what he's doing because he's wealthy. It doesn't matter. And like, even like royalty, you can inherit your wealth. And then you are suddenly just better than everyone, even if you did nothing to gain that wealth. Which, by the way, is why the estate tax exists. It's supposed to prevent American royalty from coming into play.
Yeah, it has to do with paying taxes on shit that you're inherited.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
The idea was so that, like, if your father was the wealthiest man in America and you did absolutely nothing in your life, that you wouldn't just somehow become one of the most powerful men in America by virtue of being born. Because this is America. And if you are going to be one of the most powerful people in the country, you're supposed to earn it.
But I thought that was already taken back. I thought they fucking executive ordered that shit. Like, that was one of like the first things.
But that's why they went after that. It's right, because it's the only thing that threatens their royalty, like their control of power. Once you take away the estate tax, all money just stays in the hands of the rich. It never gets taken anywhere, and they just stay rich. And you might be like, well, they earned it. And it's like, yeah, their great-grandfather earned it. And they were advised at the age of 20 to take most of their inheritance and give it to some guy who they barely know, who actually invested that money and who actually made them all their dividends. Most of those people, even the ones who were like, well, he invested what he inherited and that made it, well, he didn't invest it. Someone else invested it for him. And the only reason he had all that money and that connection was because he was basically born into royalty.
Right.
You can't do that. And that's what should tell you. Like, if you can't go out and do any of the things that made the people who are rich around you, if you can't just go do that and make yourself rich, then there's got to be something else to the equation. Like, if A plus B doesn't equal C, then there's more there that you're just not factoring in. And it's usually, I mean, it's like a web, man. You name it, everything affects everything. That's the like great illusion, is this idea that like things are not connected.
Right.
That what you do doesn't affect other people, or like what doesn't bother you doesn't matter, or like that's all fucking a myth to get you to act without thinking about how your actions affect other people. But that's just not true. And we know that. And we know that like you can't just go out and be like, cool, I'm going to become a millionaire tomorrow.
I see what you're saying. Tomorrow's is a big day. Tomorrow, for those of you listening tonight or today, when this is up and live, it's the midterm. It's a very, very, very special midterm election. But all of them should be. But this one really, really is.
It's about as important as any other.
There's been record turnouts in towns, cities, areas in general of early voting, and numbers like never before seen, ever. And there's candidates that we've...
Well, I mean, that's not never before seen. It's just significantly higher than it's been in the last several elections. And that's because voting numbers were significantly down in the last several elections. So, like, the numbers that are coming out right now are, like, what we would have considered normal, like, 20 years ago.
Well, technically, if you like count for like an inflation of population.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's like the numbers we're seeing now proportionally, which is really what matters, is like percentage-wise, how many people are actually voting, percentage-wise. And the percentages are far more aligned with like essentially the time before the massive like push for disenfranchisement came in. So like roughly 10 to 15 years ago, when like people wanted to vote. And people didn't have as many obstacles to voting, people voted more. Surprise.
What do you think it would take for gerrymandering to end?
I don't know. Because the simple question is, how do you convince someone to give up one of their keys of power? Like, my answer is usually trickery. Because I want the key to power, but like that's not. You don't want to set that example. I wouldn't be like, oh well, I don't like how the government works, so I'm going to trick them into giving me what I want. That's not solving. That's not fixing the government. That's just getting you what you want. But like, it's an incredibly difficult problem because that's basically what it comes down to. When you boil it all down, it goes, how do you get whoever benefits from the gerrymandering to agree to give up that power? Because you can't get more power than them. The gerrymandering sees to that. That's the whole point of the gerrymandering. You're never going to turn this district because of the way it's arranged. Okay. So then maybe you can be like, hey, maybe you should just run like a fair election.
Right.
Like, how do you...
Let's give that a shot.
Yeah. I mean, the answer is essentially like... And what it will come down to is essentially what I said. It will be some form of trickery. But it won't be like... deceit. It will essentially just be a loophole. How do you get anything? How do you take power away from anyone? You usually find a legal loophole that lets you strike while the iron is hot before anyone can figure out what you're doing and then take away that power.
Do you predict a blue wave?
A blue wave?
Everyone's saying there's this big blue wave that's about to happen now that it's the first time there's a vote since everything's happened in the last 2 years. Do you think that we're going to see just a complete new spectrum for it, or is it going to be
a
letdown for...
Oh, it's going to be a massive letdown, and there's a very like logical reason for it, and it's sort of depressing, but like it's essentially, I'm sorry, not logical, logistical reason. So basically, like controlling. By the way, like look up this video. It's called "The Keys to Power." Or Rules for Rulers is what it's called. It's by this guy. It's like his username is like PPCGB or something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all letters. I'll send you a link to it if you want to post it up with this later on.
Absolutely.
But there's a fantastic video. It's about 15 minutes long, and it basically details sort of the like basic mechanics of how to gain and maintain power in literally any system. Because the basic rules for like authority never change depending on what government you're in. They just change in scope. But essentially what it says is like, when you are in power, you can't do everything by yourself. You know, like if you're president, that doesn't really mean anything if nobody listens to you, right?
Right.
So, like the president has several people who are his keys to power. They're the people who actually get shit done. Because the power of a leader doesn't come from what they can do, it comes from what they can get other people to do. So, the more dictatorial governments have fewer keys to power. You might have someone who controls the military. You might have someone who controls like propaganda and education, you know, all the social things. And then you might have someone who controls money or, you know, but you want to keep the number small, less than a handful.
It's like how in Saudi Arabia they have like just what it's roughly 4,000 to 5,000 people that have like a job in the government, but it's literally the entire family that's been breeding out. Like, dude, they were saying that their estimated worth is roughly over $1 trillion. Mm-hmm. Like just the family. And like I didn't even know that like Saudi Arabia, like the Saudi family is like what it was based off of.
Yeah, the House of Saud.
The House of Saud, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Like holy fuck! Like when you really like dive into just Saudi Arabia. Sorry, I don't want to.
Oh, dude, if you want, sometime we could talk about Saudi Arabia. Dude, I know all about that shit. I'm a big. I studied a lot of the conflicts in the Middle East over the last century, and there's some wild shit there that like. But yeah, the Cold War maps everything.
Right.
If you study the Cold War, you will understand all of history up until this point.
Is there any good RPG games that are like multiplayer that basically go over this? And I'm not talking about like Civilization, for example, just like actual role-playing dice kind of games, like in today's
that go over
game
what
library. That just, I guess, not Risk, for example. But
what, like Conquering the World?
Kind of, yeah. Or is Risk the only thing that's really out there?
So tabletop games, not really, because that's a scale that doesn't really work for tabletop, because essentially it would be like if you were emperor of some kingdom in a tabletop game, the game would be you sitting in your throne room while I had people come up to you and ask you questions about the kingdom. You wouldn't go anywhere, you wouldn't do anything. You might go to some parties or something, but like, you're the emperor. Why would you go do things? Your power is from getting other people to do things. So what I was getting at is that like you have these keys to power, and the fewer keys to power you have, technically the better, because your power is easier to manage. You know, there's only 5 people. You only have to keep 5 people happy. Whereas in a democracy, one of the good things about a democracy is that it's impossible for anyone theoretically to get that much power, because power is distributed between lots of people. So, you know, whereas in a dictatorship, you might have 5 people who control the entire government. In a democracy, you might have, 50 or 500. And they all have some piece of that power, but they don't have enough to, like, take over the government or, do anything really wild. So that can also be applied even further down. Like, you can apply this shit at your job. Wherever you work, you have a boss, and your boss has, like, mid-level managers that like carry out all of their stuff, and like they have to keep their mid-level managers somewhat happy, or else they won't do what they tell them, and then the things they want won't get done. So like there's this like chain of power literally everywhere. And it also exists inside of our political parties. And our political parties are basically arranged pretty easily. The conservatives have very few keys to power. You don't need to please that many people to pull the majority, or I'm sorry, you don't have to please that many groups to pull the majority of the conservative vote. You need evangelicals, you need Second Amendment people, you need people who say they believe in small government, whatever that means, because it never means small government, but the people who say that.
Yeah.
You need old people, and old people go back and forth. Everybody tries to cater to old people because they vote. But you need them. You need something that, and in Trump's case, it was, evoking to a previous era of America. Is how he got old people. He was basically like, you remember when you were young and America was great? But like that's only like 4 or 5 groups that you have to get, and that's like 80% of the Republican vote. Whereas the Democrats, you have every group of people of color. People of color is not a block, because each one of them wants things, and the more you treat them like a block, the less they'll support you. So if you say like people of color, that only works if you're like going towards the root of power. So like the 14th Amendment is one of the few times where it's okay to essentially like grab all people of color and lump them together, because you're saying that you can't be discriminated against by color. So great. That covers all of us all in one shot. Good move. But like at the same time, if you're like, oh, well, we're going to get, stuff specifically for this one group, whether it's Latinos or, black people or Asian Americans or from any country. I mean, there's so many places to be from in Asia, too. Like, there's so many places to be from. And, like, that's the other thing. Is, like, it goes even further. Like, you're like, oh, we're going to try to get things for Latinos. And you're like, well, I'm Hispanic. I'm not Latino. And you're like, oh, well, I guess that includes you. But, like, already you've made that disconnect. So, like, you have to simultaneously be, like, broad enough to cover everyone, but you also have to be specific enough to not make people feel left out. And within the left, there are hundreds of identities. There are sexual identities, there are racial identities, there are economic, like, class identities. The left recognizes all of these things, which is good. But it also splits all of its power between all these things. Because anytime you recognize someone, you give them power.
Right.
So the left has to unite a much more disparate group of people than the right does. So a blue wave requires you not just to get people to be like, oh, I like politicians that are Democrats. It requires you to unite vastly different groups of people under your political ideology.
Now, with that being said, though, like, even the other day, there was that, Shane Smith or some shit. It's one of those Fox News guys, and he literally went on air and was like, I just need everyone to know something real quick. This whole caravan thing is not gonna affect you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and he talked to them like you would speak to a child.
Mm-hmm.
I swear to God. And then, 3 hours later on fucking Hannity Tonight, it's this fucking caravan is now 18.6 kilometers from their next checkpoint or some shit. Fucking, we got a satellite image right over them.
Nationalists. That's the group. Yeah, nationalists.
Right.
That's the other group. Number 5, nationalists.
So, with that being said, though, we're also in a time where we've never had social media being such a factor in small town life, if that makes sense. Because when social media was around, obviously it was more of like just an instant messenger than like, here's a video and here's a GIF and here's all this shit and here's a meme and here's like...
Lies travel further and faster than they used to.
Right.
Yes.
But at the same time, not only is that the propaganda aside, if you will, it's also people having these conversations and then having to see the outcome play out regardless. And like, I watched somebody one time literally like paste this fucking like when Trump's in office comment and like, I can't fucking wait, and like this and this will happen. And this old lady who was like a fucking English teacher in elementary school was like, hey man, you remember when you said all this like a year and a half ago? Like, when is this gonna start happening? Like, even the first thing on the list didn't get done. And like, they're paying for the wall. Like, America's going to pay for it. They cut a check for the first 6 miles, but it's only 6 fucking miles. You know what I'm saying? And it was like 148 million for 6 miles.
Well, here's the other thing, and here's the left's big problem.
Yeah.
Which is what the right has figured out, and what you're discussing.
Right.
Which is that you can have someone make a logical, passionate plea, basically explaining how something is not a threat to them, and then 3 hours later you can have someone spew complete and utter nonsense, and that's probably what will stick. And what essentially you have is, yes, lies go further and faster, but I lost my train of thought on this. You were talking about the wall. Oh, no. What it comes down to is that, like, you were looking at this logically. In your mind, you're like, it's only 6 miles to the wall, and we're spending a huge amount of money, and it's not going to do anything. And that other guy's like, these people are nowhere near us. They're like hundreds of miles away in Central America. They're not even close to the border to begin with, so all these troops aren't even going near them. He's explaining logically all the facts about the situation. Politics and elections and voting have nothing, zero things to do with logic. And if you rely on logic to try to win an election, you will lose every goddamn time. And the Republicans have figured this out and the Democrats haven't. They keep thinking like, okay, they're looking at it like a math problem. Like, if we can balance the equation, we'll find the right number and we'll fucking get through. Like, they look at Barack Obama and they're like, okay, so we had the right combination of, like, young and minority, and they're trying to figure out how that math worked, and they're like, no, what you missed out on was that Barack Obama brought hope. He got elected on an emotion.
Right.
And his emotion largely stemmed from his position, yeah, sure, as, like, essentially breaking a racial barrier, but, like, people had to be hopeful that that barrier would be broken in the first place. This is an unfortunate reality of America, but people are far more comfortable with the idea of one person of color getting to make any sort of break than they are with giving all women any sort of break. So, like, that formula couldn't be repeated for Hillary Clinton. You couldn't go for the hope of changing, the precedent and being like, well, there's never been a woman elected, and we got a black guy elected last time, so we can channel that same sort of, like, breaking barriers hope. No. The truth is that, like, black people people of color cared about seeing a person of color get up there, but women won't support each other like that, and that's and men won't support them either, and like women won't support them in a large part because men like reinforce that you shouldn't. Like, we basically are like, I wouldn't vote for a woman, and then there are plenty of women who are like, I mean, what does it even matter? Like, I already know none of the men would vote for them, so it's kind of dumb to pick it, and I really don't like her anyway. And then you sort of like sour grapes it, where you're like, you don't support this thing because you don't think it's going to get supported in the first place, or they're not who you wanted, or like whoever's close to you will think less of you because you've supported this person, and you really don't need that in your life right now, because politics isn't logical, it's emotional. People vote based on emotion, or they don't vote based on emotion.
Were you shocked when Bernie didn't get the nomination? Like, honestly, like after you really found out? No?
Not at all.
No
Are you kidding me? I didn't think Bernie was going to win. I voted for him, but I didn't think he was going to win. Bernie is exactly what the Democratic Party is structured to prevent. That's another thing. Like, it's one of those things that's really frustrating about our political system is that, like, the thing that prevented Bernie from getting the nomination, I mean, there was more than just that. Bernie had several things going against him. I'm not going to make it seem like one thing was the only reason that Clinton won the nomination. She had a lot going for her. But the Democratic system is set up to prevent people like Bernie and to prevent people like Trump from being able to get the nomination.
Right.
Trump could never have taken the Democratic ticket. I'd argue that's why he ran as Republican. It was not because they align with his values more, but because their party is so much more vulnerable to being hijacked by a grassroots quote-unquote movement. Because grassroots really just means you're not supported by the institution directly. It doesn't necessarily mean that, like, people, in the street are campaigning for you, though that did eventually happen for him. But, like, it was largely, like, the idea of his grassroots campaign started with just him being like, I'm going to do this. There are some people who think I should. And, like, that just kept going. And the Democrats, their whole system is to prevent that. To prevent people like Bernie from being like, I'm not part of the party, but I want to come in and fucking take it over because the people are tired of this. And that's why you saw the look of pure horror on the Republicans' faces as Trump just kept winning.
Hold it there for 1 second.
But yeah, there was just no safeguards against someone like Trump.
Sorry, just timestamping that.
Oh, you're good.
So, do you have any no risk prediction? Like, hey, I ain't got money on it, but like, I would like to see this person in a specific election over somebody else.
I think you are going to see. I mean, like, obviously, like, I want Democrats to win across the board because I pretty much am terrified of every Republican candidate that has stepped forth in the last couple of months. Like, it's not that I'm inherently, like, always vote along party lines. I don't like the Democratic Party, so I don't vote along party lines on, like, some principle. I'm not one of those people. I don't believe in that. But I can say that every Republican running right now terrifies the shit out of me. So I am essentially being like, yeah, go vote for a Democrat. But it's not because I think they're a good party, or really, I don't even think they deserve your vote. Which, if there were more options in this country, I would love for you to be able to vote for someone else. But as it stands, you should probably go vote for a Democrat, because the Democrats aren't going to, like, flip Congress, but they will make a much better turnout this year. Like you said, the turnout is up. It's not like we've never seen, but it is like we haven't seen recently. And that's good. Like, voter turnout needs to be higher because the only reason... So this is one of those things I tell people that are against, like... or that are really for, like, restricting voting or, like, requiring IDs or, you know, any form of, like, disenfranchisement, essentially. When people are for that, I'm like, look, the more people that vote, the harder it is for anyone to steal an election. Because it's just math. Like, if 5 people come out to an election, only 3 of them have to vote the same way for the election to turn. If 500,000 people come out, then 300,000 people have, you know, you have this much bigger, like, magnitude of, like, who has to do something. So if you feel like your vote doesn't matter, it actually matters a lot more if everyone votes, because not only do you essentially prevent anyone from being able to hijack it by just being like, well, I got my 20 friends to show up, so we won. But you also make your, like, demographic matter to constituents. Like, and like, I completely understand people who are like, I don't vote because it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't do anything. I get that. I'm not one of those people who's going to tell you, like, you're wrong and you have to vote, and if you don't vote, then you don't get to complain about things. Like, that's bullshit. That's just gatekeeping politics. Like, and also, that doesn't convince anyone to vote.
Right.
Because you're just insulting them. You're like, well, you're stupid, so I'm done talking to you. Unless you do what I tell you to. That's not a convincing way to get anyone to participate in a democracy. If you want people to participate in your democracy, give them some evidence of how their votes can matter, about what it can do, as opposed to just being like, well, you know, you bought a lottery ticket. Like, don't gambler's fallacy me. I'm not a child. Don't fucking, like, talk down to me and, like, no, dude. Like, own that shit. Go out and vote, if only because, like, here's a great example. Young people outnumber most demographics in this country. Almost nobody does anything for them. And I'm not talking about people who are too young to vote, because they do count in this, but they don't count because they don't get to vote. So they're not part of this equation. People who are between the ages of 18 and 25 are fucking huge demographic. And a lot of them don't vote. And because a lot of them don't vote, nobody promises anything to 18 to 25-year-olds. That's part of what Obama did that got him elected. He made a promise to 18 to 25-year-olds. He said, you can stay on your parents' health insurance until you're 26. That gave young people a reason to actually go vote for him.
Now, here's the question, though. Do you think that's what it's going to take to get this, like, generation of, like, the Parkland kids, if you will? Because, like, when we were in school, 9/11 was the big thing. It was a domestic terrorist attack, and then
well, no, it wasn't a domestic terrorist attack.
Well, no, I'm sorry. It was a terrorist attack on home, on home turf is basically what I'm saying. Okay, and then that launched into, like, a war, the Iraq, Afghanistan war, all that shit, right? Mm-hmm. So for these kids who are in school now, like my brother's school, he's still got, like, I think 2 years left in high school. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right now, he's told me before, he's like, man, it's kind of weird. And I was like, what? He's like, sometimes I'll be walking through the hall and I'll just think, like, oh shit, what if, like, I hear, like, that pop, pop, pop kind of sound? And I'm thinking about it, we're from a very rural community. Like, it's not in a bad part of town, if that makes sense, to where, like, more urban violence or just violence in general isn't really focused in on the school, if that makes sense. Or, like, the kids are calm is the only way I can put it. There's not as many of them, you know what I mean?
Well, and you're
to a fraction apart, it's you're pretty much all.
Well, yeah, and you're seeing some of that already coming into the political game. I mean, it is not entirely off when Republicans say that Democratic lawmakers push for gun control laws immediately after, like, tragedies to garner support. That's not wrong at all. That's entirely why they do it. That doesn't make it empty, because that's the entire point of being a representative, is to carry out the will of the people. If a lot of people who vote for you, or who normally vote for you, are like, I need more gun control, and if you don't, like, try, if you don't even try, like, if you're just like, I'm not going to focus on that, I can't vote for you, well, then you suddenly are like, how many people, like, what percentage of people said they wouldn't vote for me if I didn't support gun control? 80. All right, then I guess we need to support gun control, because your job isn't to get things done for the people. It's to stay in power. And you do as many things as you can to stay in power, and in general, that usually means, like, helping out the people who can actually keep you in power. But voters have some amount of that power. They control a big part of how you stay in power. They don't control it from day to day. They also don't always like affect how you get things done, but like elections matter in that sense. You still need some way to convince people to vote for you, even if it's just more people than voted for the other guy. Like that's the sad thing about American elections, is that like low voter turnout is it's what Republicans want, because again, it lets you game the system more. If less people turn out, you need to get less people to turn out for you.
Right.
A population of 100, an election with 100 votes in it is way easier to sway than an election with 1,000 votes. So you want that number low. And you just need a few core loyal supporters, and just keep shoving the number of other people's supporters down below your core number. If I have 10,000 people, I just need to make sure less than 20,000 people vote. Boom.
Boom.
It's just math. Like, fucking, I'll just change the equation so that it's mathematically impossible for me to lose.
God damn. And we don't even, I was going to say, we've
been talking for a minute, yeah.
Yeah, we covered a lot, so I think we're going to wrap this up real quick, guys. But how many more days you got on vacation, man?
My last day is Wednesday.
Yeah. We'll talk, and we'll see if we can get you back in, and maybe we'll do a part 2, and I can throw them both up. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Dylan, one last thing. Anything, 2 minutes you want to fucking say? You got anything to plug, or like what's going on, man? Anything you want to close out with?
Yeah, man. Do stuff for you. That's what I'll close out with. If you want to go vote at the election, go do it because you want to vote. Don't let people tell you this is the most important thing in the world. It's important. It still matters, but like, if you can't make it because you got something else going on, that sucks. If you feel like it doesn't matter, I get that. Do what's going to make you feel better. If you don't think that's going to help, I would rather you did, but I'm not going to fucking chastise you. Just do what you need to do. Take care of yourself.
You take care of yourself as well, brother.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, have a good one. And, yeah, catch you later.
All right, everybody. Another show down. 13 so far. How crazy is that? Been having a blast, and I hope you guys are enjoying listening. Decided to put this pod up after the elections were closed. So, you know what? The reason I did that, because it's not up to me or to anyone else to tell you to vote. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And I hope you did. And if you didn't, well, maybe something might happen and you might consider it next time. At least consider it, all right? Love you guys. Be good to each other. Take care. And, yeah, dig it.